The sun was setting behind the tall windows of Westfield Music Academy, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The grand building stood proudly in the heart of the city, its stone walls holding the dreams of many young musicians. As the last bell rang, students poured out of classrooms laughing and talking, their instrument cases swinging by their sides. Teachers followed soon after, checking their watches and rushing to catch their buses or trains. And then, silence fell. It was in this silence that Mei Lin appeared from the small closet at the end of the hallway. She pulled her cleaning cart out slowly, careful not to make much noise. At 42, Mei Lin wasn't old, but years of hard work had left their mark on her body. Her back curved slightly when she walked, and her hands, once soft and nimble, were now rough and calloused. She wore a simple gray uniform with a name tag that most people never bothered to read. Mei Lin started her routine as she did every evening. First, the main hallway, then the classrooms, and finally, the practice rooms. She moved methodically, her mop sliding across the polished floor in smooth strokes. The work wasn't easy, but she had grown used to it over the past 5 years. Remember to clean inside the piano rooms properly, Mr. Zhao, the head of maintenance, had reminded her that morning. The board members are visiting tomorrow. Mei Lin had nodded silently. She always cleaned properly, whether important people were coming or not. That was just who she was, thorough, careful, invisible. As she pushed her cart past the administration office, she heard voices inside. Curious, she slowed down. "She's just a cleaning lady, Dad. What does it matter?" Young woman's voice, sharp with privilege. "Ling Wei, everyone at this academy deserves respect regardless of their position." The deeper voice belonged to Mr. Chen, the academy director. Mei Lin felt a small stab in her heart. She knew they were talking about her. Ling Wei, the director's daughter, had always looked through Mei Lin as if she were made of glass. Just yesterday, Ling Wei had spilled her coffee on the floor and walked away without a second glance, even though Mei Lin had been standing right there with her mop. She moved on quickly, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. It wouldn't do to lose this job. Jobs were hard to come by for someone like her, someone without proper papers, someone who spoke with an accent thick enough to cut with a knife. By the time Mei Lin reached the practice rooms, the building was completely quiet. These rooms were her favorite part of the academy. Each was soundproofed and contained either a piano or enough space for students to practice their instruments. Through the small windows in the doors, she could see the empty rooms bathed in the soft glow of evening light. Room number 7 was where the violin students practiced. Mei Lin saved this room for last every day. It wasn't part of her official routine, but she had created her own small ritual over the years. She entered the room and breathed in deeply. The scent of wood and rosin hung in the air, a smell that took her back to another life, another time. She placed her cleaning supplies in the corner and began dusting the shelves lined with music books. Her eyes scanned the titles: Bach, Mozart, Tchaikovsky. Names that once meant everything to her. As she worked, Mei Lin hummed softly, a melody from her childhood. Her mother used to sing it while cooking dinner in their small kitchen back home. The memory was so clear that for a moment, Mei Lin could almost smell the spices and hear the sizzle of vegetables in the hot pan. The sound of laughter broke her reverie. Through the window in the door, she saw a group of students passing by, the last stragglers leaving after extended practice. Among them was Ling Wei, her long hair perfectly styled, designer clothes making her stand out even among the other wealthy students. Mei Lin ducked her head instinctively, hoping they wouldn't notice her, but luck wasn't on her side that evening. "Look who's still here," Ling Wei's voice carried through the door as she stopped and pointed. "The cleaning ghost." The other students laughed, not cruel but careless, the way people laugh at jokes they don't find particularly funny, but want to please the joke teller. "My dad says she used to live in a village so small it's not even on maps." Ling Wei continued, unaware or uncaring that Mei Lin could hear every word. "Can you imagine coming from nothing to cleaning after people who'll actually be something, Mei?" Lin kept her eyes on the floor, methodically moving her cloth over surfaces already clean. This wasn't the first time she had overheard such comments. and it wouldn't be the last. The key was to remain invisible, to let the words flow around her like water around a stone. After what felt like an eternity, the students moved on, their voices fading down the hallway. Mei Lin let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She finished cleaning the room quickly, eager now to complete her tasks and retreat to the safety of her ritual. Once everything was spotless, Mei Lin glanced at the door to make sure no one was passing by. Then, slowly, she walked to the corner, where a violin case sat on a shelf. It wasn't expensive, just one of the school's loaner instruments for students who couldn't afford their own. No one would miss it for a few minutes. With trembling hands, Mei Lin opened the case. Inside lay a violin that had seen better days. Its varnish was scratched in places, and the bow needed rehairing. But to Mei Lin it was beautiful. She didn't pick it up. She never did. Instead, she just ran her fingers lightly over the strings, feeling the smoothness of the wood, remembering how it felt to hold such an instrument against her chin. 20 years ago, in a different country, in a different life, Mei Lin had been someone else. Not a cleaning lady invisible to the world, but a young woman with dreams as big as the sky. Dreams that had been buried under the weight of necessity, of survival. From her pocket, she pulled out a crumpled photograph, her most prized possession. In it, a younger Mei Lin stood on a small stage, violin in hand, a medal around her neck. First place at the regional music competition, 3 months before everything changed. "You would have been proud, Baba," she whispered to the photo, to the memory of her father who had worked double shifts to pay for her lessons, who had believed in her talent when no one else did. She carefully returned the photo to her pocket and closed the violin case, making sure to place it exactly as she had found it. No one would ever know she had touched it. As Mei Lin gathered her cleaning supplies, she heard faint music coming from somewhere in the building. Someone was still practicing, hidden away in one of the rooms she had already cleaned. The melody floated through the hallways, Vivaldi's Winter from the Four Seasons. Despite herself, Mei Lin stopped to listen. The player was good, technically proficient, but something was missing. The notes were correct but empty, like reciting words without understanding their meaning. Mei Lin found herself mentally adjusting the tempo, adding the emotion that was lacking. In her mind, her fingers moved across invisible strings, muscle, memory that had never quite faded. The music stopped abruptly, followed by a frustrated sigh that echoed down the hallway. Moments later, a young boy hurried past, violin case in hand, not even noticing Mei Lin standing in the shadows. She watched him leave, this child with opportunities she once dreamed of. There was no bitterness in her heart, just a quiet acceptance of life's strange paths. Her journey had led her here, to this place where music lived in every corner, even if she was only allowed to be its caretaker rather than its creator. As she pushed her cart toward the supply closet to end her day, Mei Lin didn't know that her secret ritual, her private connection to music, would soon be exposed in the most public way possible. She didn't know that in 2 weeks' time, during the Academy's prestigious annual gala, her life would change forever. For now, she was just Mei Lin, the cleaning lady who hummed while she worked and who, in the privacy of empty rooms, remembered who she used to be. 2 weeks passed quickly at Westfield Music Academy. Posters announcing the annual charity gala appeared on every wall, their gold lettering catching the light. An evening of excellence, they proclaimed in fancy script. For the students and teachers, the gala meant excitement, opportunity, and a chance to shine. For Mei Lin, it meant extra hours of cleaning and preparation. The Academy's grand hall, usually reserved for end-of-year recitals, was being transformed into a glittering venue worthy of the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers were cleaned and polished until they sparkled like diamonds. The wooden floors were waxed until they reflected like mirrors. Fresh flowers arrived daily, their sweet scent filling the air. Mei Lin worked tirelessly alongside the other maintenance staff, her small frame moving efficiently between tasks. She dusted the ornate picture frames lining the walls, portraits of famous musicians who had once walked these same halls. She polished the brass railings of the grand staircase until she could see her tired reflection in them. And each evening, she swept the stage where talented young musicians would soon perform for wealthy donors. "Make sure every inch shines," Mr. Zhao instructed the cleaning staff. "The future of the academy depends on the money raised at this event." Meilin understood the importance. The scholarships that allowed some less fortunate students to attend came directly from these donors' pockets. So she scrubbed and polished with extra care, ignoring the ache in her back and the roughness of her chapped hands. On Wednesday afternoon, 3 days before the gala, Meilin was cleaning the windows in the director's office when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "We need something special this year," Mr. Chen was saying to someone Meilin couldn't see. "Something to make the gala memorable." "I've been thinking about that," came the reply, Ling Wei's voice smooth as silk. "What if we had a surprise performer? Someone unexpected." "Like who?" Mr. Chen sounded interested. Meilin kept her head down, pretending to focus on a stubborn smudge on the glass. She had learned long ago that being invisible had its advantages. People spoke freely when they forgot you were there. "What about the cleaning lady?" Ling Wei's voice dropped to a whisper, but not low enough. "The one who's always humming while she works." Meilin's hand froze on the window. "Meilin? What about her?" Mr. Chen sounded confused. "I've seen her looking at the violins in the practice rooms. She seems fascinated by them." Ling Wei paused. "What if we had her play something? It would be different." Meilin felt her chest tighten. They had noticed. Her private moments, her secret ritual. Not so secret after all. "I don't understand," Mr. Chen said slowly. "Are you suggesting we ask our cleaning staff to perform at our prestigious gala? Most of our performers have been training since they were 4 years old. That's exactly why it would be so special," Ling Wei insisted, her voice taking on the wheedling tone Meilin had heard her use when she wanted something from her father. "It would show how inclusive the academy is, how we believe music belongs to everyone, not just the privileged few." The donors would eat it up. There was silence for a moment. Meilin held her breath. "It's an interesting idea," Mr. Chen finally said, "but I'm not sure Meilin would agree to such a thing. It might embarrass her." Meilin silently thanked him for his consideration. "We could make it part of the night's entertainment," Ling Wei continued, undeterred. "A segment where we invite an audience member to try an instrument, except instead of a random audience member, we'd call on Meilin. We could say it's to honor the hard work of our support staff." "And what if she refuses?" Mr. Chen asked. "Why would she?" Ling Wei's voice hardened slightly. "It's a chance to be part of something special. Besides, she needs this job, doesn't she?" The threat was veiled but clear. Even Mr. Chen must have heard it because he sighed deeply. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "Now let's discuss the rest of the program." Lin finished cleaning the window with trembling hands. Her mind raced with panic. They wanted to put her on stage in front of hundreds of people to play an instrument she hadn't touched in 20 years. The very thought made her feel sick. As she gathered her cleaning supplies and slipped quietly out of the office, she caught a glimpse of Ling Wei sitting across from her father. The young woman was smiling, but her eyes were cold. That night, Meilin couldn't sleep. In her tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city, she paced the worn carpet, considering her options. She could quit her job at the academy, find work elsewhere. But jobs were scarce, especially for someone without proper papers. The academy paid well, and the evening hours meant she could take care of her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Wu, during the day in exchange for reduced rent. She could refuse to play if asked. But Ling Wei's words echoed in her mind. She needs this job, doesn't she? It wasn't a question, but a reminder of how precarious Meilin's position was. Or she could do as they asked. Stand on that stage, pick up a violin and, what? Pretend to play. Make screeching noises that would have the audience covering their ears. Either way, she would be humiliated, a source of entertainment rather than a person deserving of dignity. Thidiu. Next morning, Maylin arrived at the academy with dark circles under her eyes. She went about her duties mechanically, her mind still troubled by the conversation she had overheard. At midday, just as she was taking her lunch break in the small staff room, her phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Zhao. "Director wants to see you in his office now." Maylin's heart sank. With shaking legs, she made her way to the director's office, each step feeling heavier than the last. Mr. Chen was alone when she entered, seated behind his large desk covered with papers. He looked up and smiled kindly. "Ah, Maylin. Thank you for coming. Please sit down." She perched on the edge of the chair opposite him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I wanted to talk to you about the upcoming gala," Mr. Chen began, adjusting his glasses. "As you know, it's our biggest event of the year." Maylin nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "My daughter had an interesting suggestion," he continued. "She thought it might be nice to include a segment where we celebrate the contributions of our support staff, the people who make the academy function day to day, but rarely get recognition." Maylin stayed silent, waiting for what she knew was coming. "We were hoping you might be willing to participate," Mr. Chen said, watching her closely. "It would involve coming on stage briefly during the gala." "To clean?" Maylin asked quietly, clinging to a desperate hope. Mr. Chen chuckled nervously. No. Actually, to play an instrument. I understand you have an interest in the violin, and there it was. The trap was sprung. I don't play," Maylin said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's quite all right," Mr. Chen assured her. "No one expects you to be skilled. It's merely symbolic, a way of showing that music belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford lessons. In other words, a way of showing far below the students she was, a way of reinforcing that she didn't belong in their world except as an object of amusement or pity." "I'm not comfortable," Maylin began, but Mr. Chen raised his hand. "I understand this is outside your usual duties," he said, his tone changing slightly. "The academy would be happy to offer you a bonus for your participation. An extra week's pay, perhaps?" Maylin thought of her leaking roof, of Mrs. Wu's medicine that grew more expensive each month. An extra week's pay could make a significant difference. "And of course," Mr. Chen added, "we value your continued service here at Westfield. We'd hate to lose such a dedicated employee." The second threat was even less veiled than Ling Wei's had been. Participate or lose your job. The message was clear. Maylin looked down at her worn hands, calloused from years of scrubbing and cleaning. Once those same hands had drawn beautiful music from taut strings. Once they had been the hands of an artist. Now they were merely tools for survival. "When?" she asked finally, her voice hollow. "Saturday evening, during the gala. You'll be called up after the string quartet performs," Mr. Chen explained, relief evident in his voice. "Just a short piece, nothing elaborate. The academy can provide the violin, of course." Maylin nodded, defeated. "May I go now?" "Certainly. And thank you, Maylin. You're contributing to a worthy cause." She left without another word, closing the door softly behind her. In the empty hallway, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, fighting back tears. They had taken her private joy and turned it into a public spectacle. As she walked back to resume her duties, she passed the practice room with the loner violin. Through the window in the door, she could see it sitting in its case, waiting. For a brief moment, Maylin allowed herself to remember the weight of the instrument against her shoulder, the feel of the bow between her fingers, the rush of emotion as she drew music from the strings. 20 years was a long time, too long perhaps. But somewhere deep inside, beneath layers of hardship and resignation, a small flame flickered to life. If she had to play, if she had to face humiliation anyway, perhaps there was another way. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could surprise them all. That evening, after everyone had left the academy, Maylin stood outside the practice room containing the loner violin. Her hand rested on the doorknob, trembling slightly. For years she had limited herself to looking, never touching. The barrier she had built between her past and present was about to be broken, and she wasn't sure if she was ready. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room felt different now. No longer a place of secret longing, but a space filled with dread and possibility. She walked slowly to the shelf where the violin case sat, its scratched surface familiar after years of dusting around it. This time, she didn't just open the case and look. With shaking hands, she lifted the violin from its resting place. The instrument felt both foreign and achingly familiar, like meeting an old friend after decades apart. The wood was cool against her palm, lighter than she remembered. Mei-Lin positioned the violin under her chin, adjusting her posture automatically. Some things, it seemed, the body never forgot. She held the bow awkwardly at first, her calloused fingers struggling to find the right grip. When she drew it across the strings, the sound that emerged was harsh and discordant, making her wince. 20 years, she whispered to the empty room. 20 years is too long. But she tried again, adjusting her fingers, remembering the lessons from what felt like another lifetime. The second attempt produced a slightly better sound. The third, better still. By the fourth try, she managed to play a simple scale, the notes wobbly but recognizable. For an hour, Mei-Lin practiced basic exercises, her muscles protesting after years of different work. Her shoulder ached from holding the violin, and her fingers burned from pressing the strings. Yet with each passing minute, something awakened inside her, a spark of joy that had been dormant for too long. When she finally put the violin away, her heart was beating fast, not just from exertion, but from fear and excitement. Could she do this? Could she actually play in front of people after all this time? The answer was still unclear, but one thing was certain. If she was going to be humiliated either way, she would rather go down fighting than surrender without trying. So, next day, Mei-Lin arrived at the academy earlier than usual. She slipped into the practice room before the first students arrived, borrowed the violin again, and practiced for 30 minutes. Her progress was minimal, but each note felt more natural than the last. Throughout the day, as she cleaned and prepared for the gala, Mei-Lin's mind was filled with music, fragments of pieces she had once known by heart, exercises her teacher had drilled into her, melodies that had once flowed from her fingers like water. That night, after finishing her shift, she stayed late again. This time, she attempted a simple piece she had learned as a child. Her fingers fumbled over the faster passages, and her intonation was far from perfect, but the melody was recognizable. For a brief moment, Mei-Lin closed her eyes and allowed herself to remember who she had been before. Images flooded her mind. The small apartment where she grew up, her father working late into the night to pay for her lessons, her mother sewing her a special dress for her first recital. She remembered her teacher, Mr. Liu, stern but kind, pushing her to be better each day. She remembered the feeling of standing on stage, the weight of expectation, the thrill of performance. And she remembered why it had all ended. The protests, the crackdown. Her father, always vocal about his beliefs, taken away in the night. Her mother, desperate to find him, disappearing as well. The frantic escape arranged by her uncle, a boat, a false passport, the terrifying journey to a new country where she knew no one and had nothing. 20 years of survival, of starting over, of becoming invisible. Mei-Lin opened her eyes, surprised to find tears streaming down her face. The violin in her hands was no longer just an instrument, but a bridge to the past she had locked away. With renewed determination, she practiced until her fingers bled, pushing through the pain, reclaiming a piece of herself with every note. The night before the gala, Mei-Lin made a decision. After putting away her cleaning supplies, she took out her phone and searched online for a piece she had once known well, Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto. She found a recording and listened, letting the familiar melody wash over her. It was far beyond her current abilities after years without practice, but certain passages, the opening, parts of the first movement, might still be possible. She took the violin one last time and attempted the opening bars. It was rough, imperfect, but the essence was there. She wouldn't be able to play the entire concerto, not even close, but perhaps a simplified version of the beginning would be enough. Enough to show that she wasn't just a cleaning lady. Enough to reclaim a small piece of her dignity. As she locked up the academy that night, a strange calm settled over Mei Lin. Tomorrow she would either find redemption or face complete humiliation. Either way, something would change. She slept poorly that night, dreams filled with music and memories. She woke early, hours before her shift was set to begin. Sitting on the edge of her bed, she opened the small box where she kept her most precious possessions. The photo of her younger self holding a violin and a medal, a faded letter from her teacher predicting a bright future, and a simple jade bracelet that had belonged to her mother. Mei Lin slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. It would be her talisman tonight, a connection to her past, a source of courage. When she arrived at the academy, the place was buzzing with activity. Florists arranged elaborate centerpieces, caterers set up in the kitchen, and technical crews adjusted lighting and sound equipment on the stage. Everyone was too busy to notice the cleaning lady who moved through the chaos quietly, going about her usual tasks while her mind was elsewhere. At midday, Mr. Zhao found her polishing the grand piano in the reception area. "Mei Lin, Director Chen wants to see you," he said, looking puzzled. "Something about tonight's program." Mei Lin nodded, wiping her hands on her apron before making her way to the director's office. Inside, she found not only Mr. Chen but also Ling Wei and a well-dressed woman she didn't recognize. "Ah, Mei Lin," Mr. Chen said when she entered. "This is Ms. Park, our event coordinator. We're finalizing the details for tonight's program." Ms. Park looked Mei Lin up and down with a critical eye. "So this is our special performer?" "Yes," Ling Wei said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mei Lin has agreed to help us demonstrate the Academy's inclusive approach to music education." The way she said it made Mei Lin's skin crawl. This wasn't about inclusion. It was about entertainment at her expense. "We'll need you dressed appropriately," Ms. Park said, still eyeing Mei Lin's cleaning uniform with distaste. "Do you have anything presentable?" Before Mei Lin could answer, Ling Wei interjected. "I've taken care of that. One of the costume department's simpler dresses should fit her. Nothing too fancy, of course. We want to keep the contrast noticeable." Mei Lin stared at the floor, heat rising in her cheeks. They were discussing her as if she weren't in the room, as if she were a prop rather than a person. And which piece? "Will she attempt?" Ms. Park asked, scribbling notes on her tablet. "We thought something recognizable," Mr. Chen said. "Perhaps Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? Something the audience will know, even when it's—" He trailed off, apparently uncomfortable with finishing the sentence. "Even when it's butchered," Ling Wei completed for him, not bothering to lower her voice. Mei Lin's hands curled into fists at her sides. They expected her to play a children's song, to fumble through notes a 5-year-old could manage, to be a source of amusement for their wealthy guests. "I will play Tchaikovsky," she said quietly, surprising herself with her boldness. 3 pairs of eyes turned to her in shock. "Excuse me?" Ms. Park said. "Violin concerto. First movement. Opening section." Mei Lin's voice grew stronger with each word. Ling Wei laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. "You can't be serious. That's one of the most difficult pieces in the repertoire. Professional violinists spend years perfecting it." "I know," Mei Lin said simply. "This isn't about you showing off, Mei Lin," Mr. Chen said gently as if speaking to a child. "It's about demonstrating that music is for everyone, regardless of training." In other words, it was about watching her fail. The realization strengthened Mei Lin's resolve. "I will play Tchaikovsky," she repeated, meeting Mr. Chen's gaze directly for the first time. "Or I will not play at all." The room fell silent. Ms. Park looked between Mr. Chen and Mei Lin, clearly confused by this unexpected turn. Finally, Ling Wei broke the silence with another laugh. "Fine. Let her try Tchaikovsky. It will be even more entertaining when she can't manage it." Mr. Chen sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. Very well, Maylin, if you insist. But please understand the purpose of this segment is to show our donors that music is accessible to everyone. If you attempt something too difficult, I understand, Maylin said. And she did. She understood perfectly that they expected her to fail, that her failure was part of their entertainment. What they didn't understand was that she had already lost everything once before. The prospect of losing face in front of strangers held little fear compared to what she had already endured. The program begins at 7, Ms. Park said, returning to business. You'll perform after the string quartet around 8:30. Someone will bring you the dress and show you where to change. Maylin nodded and turned to leave, her heart pounding, but her mind clear. As she reached the door, Ling Wei called after her. Oh, and Maylin? Make sure the bathrooms are spotless before you change. We can't have our donors seeing anything less than perfection. Maylin closed the door without responding. Let them think what they wanted. Let them underestimate her. Tonight, for better or worse, she would play again, and for the first time in 20 years that was enough. The day of the gala passed in a blur for Maylin. She cleaned bathrooms, polished floors, and dusted surfaces with mechanical precision, her mind elsewhere. Her hands moved through familiar motions while her thoughts drifted between memories of her past and fears about the evening ahead. By 6 o'clock, the transformation of Westfield Music Academy was complete. The grand hall sparkled under the chandeliers, tables draped in white linen circled a dance floor, and the stage was set with elegant music stands and chairs for the performers. Flowers and candles added warmth to the space, their scent mixing with the smells of expensive perfume and catered food as the first guests began to arrive. Maylin watched from the shadows as women in evening gowns and men in tuxedos filed in, air-kissing each other and making small talk over champagne. These were people whose homes she might clean, whose children attended schools like Westfield, whose lives were as far removed from hers as the stars. Maylin! She turned to see one of the younger kitchen staff, a girl named Tao, hurrying toward her with a garment bag. They told me to give you this, Tao said, handing over the bag, and to tell you to change in room 103. Someone will come get you when it's time. Maylin took the bag with a nod of thanks. Inside, she knew, would be the dress Ling Wei had mentioned. Something simple enough to emphasize that she didn't belong in this glittering world. Room 103 was a small office near the back of the building. Maylin locked the door behind her and opened the garment bag with trepidation. Inside was a plain black dress, the kind worn by waitstaff at fancy restaurants. There was nothing wrong with it exactly. It was clean and properly sized, but its message was clear. Even dressed up, she was still the help. Maylin changed quickly, folding her uniform neatly. The dress fit well enough, though the fabric was stiff and uncomfortable. She looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall and barely recognized the woman staring back. With her hair pulled back severely and her face bare of makeup, she looked older than her 42 years. The jade bracelet on her wrist seemed out of place with the plain dress, but she couldn't bear to remove it. For a moment, doubt overwhelmed her. What was she thinking? She couldn't play Tchaikovsky after 20 years without practice. She was setting herself up for even worse humiliation than if she had agreed to play a simple children's tune. A knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. 5 minutes, called a voice she didn't recognize. Maylin took a deep breath. It was too late to back out now. Whether triumph or disaster awaited, she would face it with the dignity her parents had taught her. She straightened her shoulders and left the small room, following the signs to the backstage area. The hallway leading to the stage was crowded with young musicians in formal attire, chatting excitedly as they waited their turn to perform. They fell silent as Maylin passed, curious eyes following her. News of the cleaning lady's performance had clearly spread. "Good luck," whispered one young boy, a violin case clutched in his hands. The sincerity in his voice brought unexpected tears to Maylin's eyes. "Thank you," she managed to reply before moving on. Backstage was organized chaos. Stage hands with headsets rushed about, guiding performers to their marks. A string quartet was just finishing their performance, the final notes of Mozart floating through the air. Applause followed, polite and appreciative. Mr. Chen stood at the side of the stage, microphone in hand, ready to address the audience. He glanced at Mei Lin with a mixture of concern and resignation before stepping into the spotlight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your generous support of Westfield Music Academy. Your contributions make it possible for us to nurture the next generation of musical talent. Mei Lin half listened to his speech about inclusion and opportunity, about how music belonged to everyone regardless of background or privilege. The irony wasn't lost on her. Tonight, we have a special demonstration of our belief that music transcends all boundaries, Mr. Chen continued. One of our dedicated staff members, who has never had formal training, has bravely agreed to try her hand at the violin. Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the audience. Mei Lin felt her face burn with shame. This was exactly what she had feared, being made into a joke, a curiosity, a reminder of the distance between the haves and have-nots. Please welcome Mei Lin to the stage. On trembling legs, she stepped into the harsh light. The audience before her was a blur of faces, hundreds of eyes watching, waiting for the entertainment to begin. At the front table, Ling Wei sat with a group of other young people smirking in anticipation. A stagehand appeared with a violin, not the worn loner she had practiced with, but a gleaming instrument that looked both beautiful and intimidating. This is a Stradivarius from our private collection, Mr. Chen explained to the audience. Nearly 300 years old and worth over $4 million. Our guest will be borrowing it for her performance. More laughter. The message was clear. The contrast between the priceless instrument and the cleaning lady was meant to amuse. Mei Lin's hands shook as she took the violin. It was lighter than she expected, perfectly balanced. Despite everything, a part of her thrilled at the opportunity to hold such a masterpiece. And what will you be playing for us tonight? Mr. Chen asked, the microphone thrust toward her face. Mei Lin swallowed hard. Tchaikovsky, Violin Concerto, First Movement. Mr. Chen's smile faltered. He hadn't believed she would actually go through with it. From the front table, Ling Wei's laugh carried clearly across the silent room. Well, Mr. Chen said after an awkward pause, this should be interesting. He retreated from the stage, leaving Mei Lin alone in the spotlight. For a moment, she stood frozen, the weight of 300 pairs of eyes crushing her. The violin felt foreign in her hands. What had she been thinking? She couldn't do this. She should put the instrument down, walk off the stage, pack her things, and never return to Westfield again. Then her fingers brushed against the jade bracelet on her wrist, and she thought of her mother, of her father, of the sacrifices they had made for her music, of Mr. Liu telling her she had a gift that shouldn't be wasted. Mei Lin closed her eyes. The room disappeared. The audience, with their expectations and judgments, faded away. She was no longer a middle-aged cleaning lady in an ill-fitting dress on a stage where she didn't belong. She was just a woman with a violin, a woman who had once loved music more than anything. Slowly, she raised the Stradivarius to her chin, feeling its perfect contours settle against her neck as if it had been made for her. She positioned the bow over the strings, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were hesitant, slightly off-key. 20 years of silence couldn't be erased in a few days of practice. From somewhere in the audience came a stifled laugh, quickly hushed. But Mei Lin didn't stop. She pushed through the awkwardness, focused on the feeling of the strings beneath her fingers, the weight of the bow in her hand. With each measure, her confidence grew. Her body remembered what her mind had forgotten, the subtle shifts of weight, the pressure needed for each note, the way her wrist needed to flex for vibrato. The opening of Tchaikovsky's concerto flowed from the instrument, gaining strength and clarity. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was real, authentic. Mei Lin poured everything into the music, her lost dreams, her years of hardship, her longing for what might have been. The audience fell completely silent. The laughter died away. Even the waitstaff stopped moving among the tables. All eyes were fixed on the small woman on stage, dressed in black, her eyes closed as she played with growing assurance. Maylin lost herself in the music. The years fell away. She was 20 again, full of hope and promise. She was playing for her parents, for her teacher, for herself. The technical difficulties that had seemed insurmountable days ago now yielded to muscle memory and raw emotion. Her fingers found their way across the fingerboard as if guided by an invisible hand. The rich, warm tone of the Stradivarius filled the hall, soaring to the rafters. Tchaikovsky's beautiful melody, romantic, yearning, powerful, touched something in everyone who listened. This was no fumbling attempt by an untrained amateur. This was music created by someone who understood its soul. As Maylin approached the end of the section she had prepared, something unexpected happened. Instead of stopping, her fingers continued to move, playing passages she hadn't practiced. But that lived somewhere deep in her musical memory. She ventured into the more difficult sections of the first movement, navigating the technical challenges with growing confidence. She wasn't aware of the tears streaming down her face. She didn't see the stunned expressions on the faces of the audience members, or the way Mr. Chen's mouth had fallen open in shock, or how Ling Wei had gone pale with disbelief. All Maylin knew was the music, the conversation between her heart and the violin, a dialogue 20 years in the making. For these few minutes, nothing else existed. Not her fears, not her regrets, not the hardships of her daily life. Just pure, transcendent sound. When she finally drew the bow across the strings, one last time letting the final note linger in the air, Maylin opened her eyes. The spotlight blinded her for a moment, and in that blindness she felt a crushing wave of vulnerability. What had she done? Had she made a fool of herself after all? Then she heard it, a single pair of hands clapping, then another, and another, until the entire hall erupted in thunderous applause, people rising to their feet, their faces showing not mockery but genuine awe and appreciation. Through the blur of tears, Maylin saw Mr. Chen standing, his expression a mixture of astonishment and shame. Next to him, Miss Park was frantically whispering to someone, gesturing toward the stage, and at the front table, Ling Wei sat motionless, her planned entertainment having backfired completely. Maylin stood unmoving, the Stradivarius still in, her hands as the applause washed over her. After 20 years of silence, she had found her voice again, and everyone had heard it. For what felt like an eternity, Maylin stood frozen on stage, the Stradivarius still tucked under her chin, as wave after wave of applause washed over her. The sound was deafening, almost physical in its intensity. People she had cleaned up after, people who had never given her a second glance, were now on their feet, clapping, some even wiping tears from their eyes. It didn't feel real. Part of her wondered if this was some cruel dream, if she would wake up in her small apartment with nothing changed. A stagehand appeared at her elbow, gently touching her arm. "Ms. Maylin, you can bow now." The simple instruction broke her trance. Lowering the violin, Maylin gave a small, awkward bow, unused to receiving such attention. The applause intensified. Someone in the back shouted, "Bravo!" Others joined in. As she straightened, she caught sight of an older gentleman in the third row, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. He was watching her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, his eyes narrowed in concentration. Unlike the others, he wasn't clapping but sitting perfectly still, his gaze never leaving her face. Before she could wonder about the stranger, Mr. Chen appeared beside her, taking the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice strained with forced joviality, "what a surprising performance from our Maylin." The audience continued to applaud, drowning out his words. He waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "As you can see, music truly is universal. Even the most unexpected people can connect with great art." His words, meant to regain control of the narrative, fell flat. Tonight wasn't about proving his point about inclusion. It was about Maylin and her extraordinary hidden talent. A woman from the front table, not Ling Wei, but someone older, elegantly dressed, stood up and addressed Mr. Chen. "Where did she study? She's clearly had classical training." All eyes turned back to Maylin. Mr. Chen looked at her questioningly, the microphone half extended toward her. Mei Lin hesitated. She hadn't spoken about her past in so long that breaking that silence felt like tearing open an old wound. But the music had already done that, hadn't it? The wound was open, and maybe, just maybe, it could finally begin to heal properly. She stepped forward and took the microphone, her hand still trembling slightly. "I studied at the National Conservatory," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Many years ago, in another life." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mr. Chen's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "The National Conservatory, but that's one of the most prestigious music schools in—" "Yes," Mei Lin cut him off gently, not wanting to name her homeland explicitly. Some wounds were still too fresh. "I was there for 6 years. I had to leave. Suddenly." She handed the microphone back to Mr. Chen and turned to leave the stage, eager to escape the spotlight. But as she reached the wings, a voice called out, "Wait!" The silver-haired man who had been watching her so intently was now standing, his hand raised. Mr. Chen, recognizing him, quickly passed him the microphone. "My name is Dr. Wu," the man said, his deep voice carrying easily across the hall. "I'm the head of the string department at the Central Symphony Orchestra." Mei Lin froze. The Central Symphony was the most prestigious orchestra in the city. 22 years ago, Dr. Wu continued, "I was a guest instructor at the National Conservatory. I remember a young violinist, exceptional talent, dedicated, with a unique emotional quality to her playing." He looked directly at Mei Lin. "I believe that was you." The room fell silent. Mei Lin felt dizzy. Could it be possible? After all these years? "You disappeared before graduation," Dr. Wu said. "There were rumors about your family, political troubles. We lost track of you." Mei Lin nodded, unable to speak. Her throat felt tight with unshed tears. "What happened tonight was no accident," Dr. Wu addressed the crowd. "What you heard was not luck or some natural untrained ability. You heard the result of thousands of hours of disciplined study, of genuine talent carefully nurtured. This woman was on track to become a soloist of international standing." He turned back to Mei Lin. "And based on what I heard tonight, despite 20 years without practice, that talent is still very much alive." A fresh round of applause broke out. Mei Lin felt exposed, vulnerable, her carefully constructed anonymity stripped away in an instant. Yet alongside the fear was something else, relief. The weight of pretending to be less than she was, of hiding her past, suddenly felt too heavy to bear any longer. Dr. Wu approached the stage and held out his hand. "Would you come speak with me for a moment?" In a daze, Mei Lin followed him too, a quiet corner of the hall away from curious eyes and ears. Up close, she could see that he was older than she had first thought, perhaps in his 70s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You have been cleaning this academy?" he asked without preamble. "Yes, for 5 years. And no one knew about your background?" I didn't tell anyone," Mei Lin said. "It was easier that way." Dr. Wu nodded thoughtfully. "Life can be cruel and unpredictable. I'm sorry for whatever circumstances brought you from the concert stage to cleaning floors." The simple kindness in his voice, free from pity or condescension, brought tears to Mei Lin's eyes. "But perhaps," he continued, "it is not too late for a different path." "I'm 42, Mei Lin said softly. "Too old to start again?" Dr. Wu smiled. "Nonsense. The technical facility you showed tonight, even after 20 years without practice, is remarkable. With dedicated work, you could recover much of what was lost. Perhaps not as a solo concert violinist. Those dreams may indeed be past, but there are many ways to have a life in music." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "The Central Symphony has an education program. We teach children from all backgrounds. Some of them have stories not unlike yours. Displaced, starting over in a new country. They need teachers who understand that journey." Mei Lin stared at the card in his hand, afraid to reach for it, afraid to hope. The pay isn't spectacular, Dr. Wu admitted with a small smile. But I suspect it's better than cleaning, and the hours would allow you to practice and recover your skills. And who knows where that might lead. With trembling fingers, Maylin took the card. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. Come to my office on Monday. We'll assess where you are technically and make a plan. It won't be easy. You have years of work ahead to recover what was lost. But I think you've proven tonight that you're no stranger to hard work. Before Maylin could respond, they were interrupted by Mr. Chen, who approached with an anxious expression. Dr. Wu, I had no idea. That is, if I had known Maylin's background. He stammered. Yes? Dr. Wu's tone was polite but cool. What would you have done differently if you had known she was a classically trained violinist instead of just your cleaning lady? Mr. Chen had the grace to look ashamed. It was not our intention to humiliate anyone. The idea was to show that music belongs to everyone. A noble sentiment, Dr. Wu replied, though perhaps it would be more convincingly demonstrated by offering scholarships to promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds, rather than by putting your maintenance staff on display. Mr. Chen flushed deeply. Yes, of course, and speaking of that, he turned to Maylin. I believe we need to discuss your position here at the academy. Perhaps there's a more suitable role for someone with your qualifications. Before Maylin could answer, a commotion near the front of the hall caught their attention. Ling Wei was standing, her face flushed with anger or embarrassment, arguing with Ms. Park. When she noticed everyone watching, she stormed out of the hall, pushing past waitstaff carrying trays of champagne. My daughter is passionate about music, Mr. Chen said weakly. Sometimes that passion leads to poor judgment. Indeed, Dr. Wu said dryly. Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe Mei Lin and I were discussing her future. As Mr. Chen retreated, Mei Lin found her voice again. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted. It's been so long. I've built a different life. Dr. Wu studied her thoughtfully. May I ask you something? During those years of cleaning, of hiding your talent, were you happy? Mei Lin considered the question. The small apartment she returned to each night. The solitude. The routine of work that required her hands, but never her heart or mind. The secret moments listening outside practice rooms, living vicariously through others' music. I survived, she said finally. That was enough. And now? Could surviving still be enough now that you've remembered what it feels like to truly live? The question hung in the air between them. Around them, the gala continued. Guests chatting, music playing softly in the background, waiters circulating with food and drinks. But Maylin barely noticed. In her mind, she was still on stage, still feeling the indescribable joy of making music again after so many years of silence. No, she said quietly. I don't think it can. Dr. Wu smiled. Then I'll see you on Monday. As he walked away to rejoin his table, Maylin stood alone for a moment, the business card clutched in her hand. She thought of her parents, who had sacrificed so much for her music, of her teacher, who had believed in her talent, of the young girl she had been, full of dreams and ambition. That girl was long gone. The woman who stood in her place was older, wiser, marked by hardship and loss. But perhaps some essence remained, the core of who she was meant to be, buried but not destroyed by the intervening years. Maylin slipped the card into her pocket and touched the jade bracelet on her wrist. Tonight had been meant as a humiliation, a reminder of her place in the world. Instead, it had become a homecoming. As she made her way toward the back of the hall, planning to change out of the borrowed dress and process everything that had happened, she was stopped repeatedly by guests wanting to meet her, to express their admiration, to ask about her background. People who had passed her in hallways for years without a glance now hung on her every word. It was strange and uncomfortable, this sudden visibility. Maylin answered their questions politely but briefly, overwhelmed by the attention. As she finally reached the door, she felt a light touch on her arm. Turning, she found the young violinist who had wished her good luck backstage. That was amazing. he said, his eyes wide with genuine admiration. Do you think, would you ever, could you teach me to play like that? Mei Lin looked at the boy, 12, perhaps 13 years old, clutching his violin case with the earnestness of youth. In his face, she saw herself at that age, passionate about music, hungry to learn, believing that anything was possible. Perhaps, she said, smiling genuinely for what felt like the first time in years. Perhaps I could. Outside, the night air was cool against her skin. Mei Lin looked up at the stars scattered across the dark sky. For 20 years she had lived in the shadows, small and quiet, wanting nothing more than to be invisible. Tonight she had stepped into the light. Tomorrow would bring challenges, questions to answer, decisions to make, a new path to forge. But for now, for this moment, Mei Lin simply allowed herself to feel the joy of being truly seen, of reclaiming the gift she had thought lost forever. The music, after all these years, had found its way back home.